there is a particular kind of person you may have met, or perhaps you are this person yourself. They show up when you need them. They remember the small things you mentioned in passing months ago. They notice when something is off with you before you even say a word. And yet, if you were to ask them directly how they feel, they would shrug. They would deflect with humor, change the subject, or offer you the quietest, most non-committal answer they could find. They care deeply, almost overwhelmingly, and yet they have mastered the art of appearing as though nothing truly reaches them. This is not a contradiction. This is a survival strategy, and understanding it may be one of the most compassionate things you can ever do for yourself. The roots of this pattern almost always reach back to early emotional experiences. For many people, caring openly was not safe. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where expressing emotion was met with dismissal, where showing that something mattered to you only gave others the tools to hurt you, ignore you, or use your vulnerability against you. Maybe you learned early on that love was conditional, that warmth came and went unpredictably, and that the safest way to protect your heart was to pretend it did not exist. Children are extraordinary adapters. When the environment they grow up in punishes emotional openness, they find creative, intelligent ways to survive. One of the most common of those ways is emotional detachment. Not real detachment, but performed detachment. The feelings never go away. They simply go underground. This is the distinction that matters most and is most often misunderstood, both by the people who carry this pattern and by those who love them. Indifference, true indifference, is the absence of feeling. What we are talking about here is the opposite. It is an abundance of feeling that has learned to wear a mask. The person who acts indifferent while caring deeply is not cold. They are, in many cases, more emotionally attuned than most. They feel everything. The problem is that somewhere along the way, they learned that feeling everything out loud was dangerous. So they built walls. Tall, elegant, convincing walls. Walls so well constructed that sometimes even they forget there is a whole emotional world living quietly behind them. In everyday life, this pattern shows up in ways that can be quietly heartbreaking. Think of the person who spends hours carefully choosing a gift for a friend but brushes it off with "it was nothing" when the friend expresses gratitude. Or the partner who stays up worrying about the person they love but answers "I'm fine" when asked what's wrong. Think of the one who would move mountains for the people they care about but cannot bring themselves to say, "I love you" first. Because saying it first means showing their hand, and showing their hand has always felt like the beginning of losing. They give through actions because actions feel safer than words. Words are declarations. Words make you visible. And being visible, for someone who learned that vulnerability leads to pain, can feel like standing in the middle of a storm without shelter. There is also an element of self-protection intertwined with pride here. If you never admit how much you care, then you can never fully be rejected for it. If you keep your feelings at a comfortable arm's length, at least in terms of what you express outwardly, then the potential loss becomes more manageable. Or so the mind believes. The painful irony is that this strategy designed to prevent hurt often creates the very disconnection it is meant to protect against. The people who act indifferent while caring deeply often find themselves in a confusing cycle, longing for closeness and intimacy, but behaving in ways that inadvertently keep people at a distance. They wonder why they feel unseen, not always recognizing that they have spent years becoming very, very good at not being seen. It is also worth understanding the role that anxiety plays in this dynamic. For many people with this pattern, the indifferent exterior is not just armor against rejection. It is a way of managing the overwhelming intensity of their own emotions. When you feel things as deeply as these individuals do, unchecked emotional expression can feel like losing control. The mask of indifference is, in part, a regulation strategy. It keeps the emotional volume at a level that feels survivable. This is why these individuals often experience their feelings in private, through journaling, through long drives, through moments alone where the walls can come down briefly, without an audience. They are not avoiding their emotions. They are managing them the only way they know how. The impact on relationships can be profound and complicated. The people who love someone with this pattern often describe a particular kind of emotional confusion, the sense that they are deeply cared for, but never quite sure. They see the evidence of love in behavior, in consistency, in the quiet ways they are shown that they matter. And yet, the emotional confirmation, the verbal acknowledgement, the moments of open vulnerability, those feel rare, hard-won, and fleeting. Over time, this can erode a partner's confidence in the relationship, not because the love is not real, but because it is not sufficiently expressed in the language of emotional openness that most people need to feel secure. The person behind the mask often cannot understand why their partner still feels unloved. "I show up," they say. "I'm always here." And they are right. But presence alone cannot always substitute for the experience of being emotionally met. Healing this pattern is not about dismantling protection that no longer serves. It is about gently, compassionately learning that you are safe enough now to begin letting the walls be a little more permeable. This is not a process that happens overnight, and it does not require a sudden transformation into someone who wears their heart entirely on their sleeve. It begins with something much quieter. Awareness, recognizing the moments when you are about to retreat behind the mask and pausing there, noticing what fear is underneath that impulse, asking yourself, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity, what it is you are protecting yourself from in this specific moment, and whether that threat is real or a ghost from a time long past. It also involves slowly practicing small acts of emotional honesty. Not grand declarations, but small ones. Saying, "I was worried about you," instead of "whatever, you're fine." Saying, "that actually meant a lot to me," instead of "it was no big deal." These moments can feel exposing at first, almost unbearably so. But each time you survive the vulnerability, you build a new kind of evidence. Evidence that you can be seen and still be okay. Evidence that the people who love you will not weaponize your softness. That evidence, accumulated slowly over time, is what eventually makes it possible to live more openly inside your own emotional life. You did not become guarded without reason. The protective instinct that taught you to hide how much you care came from somewhere real, and it served you when you needed it most. But you are not that child anymore, navigating an environment that could not hold your feelings safely. You are here, now with the capacity to choose differently, not all at once, not perfectly, but incrementally. The people who care the most have the most to give. The work is simply learning to believe that giving it will not cost you everything. It will not. And the life waiting for you on the other side of that wall, a life where you can love and be loved in full visibility, is more than worth the journey.